For 500 years, there have been institutions catering to the needs of the mentally ill. This is a lie. For 500 years, we have had places of questionable psychiatric medicine which catered to the needs of those who owned and operated them, with little regard to the well-being of the patient. Bedlam, asylum, madhouse. These terms have been variously applied to institutions which claim to be for the benefit of the mentally ill. Depictions of care from centuries past remain a part of our collective memory. Imprisonment and torture, which seem to have no purpose except to exacerbate existing conditions, were the recommended course of treatment for anyone that society wished to forget about. Since the 19th century, numerous sweeping reforms have had a drastic effect on the conditions and treatment given to patients. Yet they remain a place of imprisonment and abuse for tens of thousands of teenagers in the United States. Patients are no longer sent to these institutions to be forgotten. Instead, they are a commodity. Their continued presence in the system is for the financial benefit of the institution. The duration and quality of care is a function of their ability to pay for it, whether they want to or not. The dehumanizing tactics of modern inpatient psychiatric care are simultaneously more humane and would be the envy of asylum wardens of the 19th century. The straitjacket has largely given way to sedatives. Padded walls have been replaced with a pervasive, numbing atmosphere. The disease and squalor of centuries past has been replaced with a sterile environment. Isolation remains the one constant of institutional care throughout the centuries. In the 1950s and 60s, the United States saw a large movement for psychiatric deinstitutionalization. In these institutions, funding was often cut, especially during periods of economic decline. Asylums became notorious for poor living conditions, lack of hygiene, overcrowding, lack of adequate staffing, and ill treatment and abuse of patients. Images of inhumane treatment, such as the lobotomy and electroshock therapy, are still pervasive today. Psychologists, physicians, and sociologists, such as Michel Foucault and Irving Goffman, have written extensively on the subject of society's dehumanizing treatment of those with mental illness throughout history. In 1887, it took the work of New York World undercover reporter Nellie Bly to expose to the United States the conditions of mental health institutions. She feigned mental illness in order to be committed to the Women's Lunatic Asylum on Blackwell's Island in New York City in order to obtain such first-hand experience. In her graphic book, 10 Days in a Madhouse, Bly wrote, "The insane asylum on Blackwell's Island is a human rat trap. It is easy to get in, but once there it is impossible to get out." She also wrote, "Give her no reading and let her know nothing of the world or its doings. Give her bad food and harsh treatment, and see how long it will take to make her insane. 2 months would make her a mental and physical wreck." What Bly described would later be known as institutional syndrome, characterized by deficits in social and life skills, which develop after a person has spent a long period living in mental hospitals, prisons, or other remote institutions. Such individuals may be deprived of independence and responsibility to the point that once they return to outside life, they are often unable to manage many of its demands. Today, minors undergoing inpatient mental health care do not have the ability to check themselves out. Many are held against their will and do not know when they will be discharged. This decision is left up to the designated psychiatrist, in some cases with consultation from the patient's parents. While there, minors have very few rights as patients and experience a severe loss of freedoms which are taken for granted outside the institution. In 1961, Irving Goffman published a collection of essays titled Asylums. There he describes the term total institution. A total institution is a place of work and residence where a group of similarly situated people, cut off from the wider community for a considerable time, together lead an enclosed, formally administered existence. Within the total institution, many human needs are under impersonal bureaucratic control. Typically, the inmate is excluded from knowledge of the decisions taken concerning his or her fate within the institution. This includes concealment of diagnosis, medication, and duration of treatment. Those who enter a total institution are deprived of the social support of their ordinary life and undergo a mortification of self via social and physical abuse. Role dispossession. In civil life, people are free to plan their lives such that they can perform a succession of roles throughout the day and throughout their lives. Life is structured such that no single role forbids one from playing other roles. In the total institution, membership disturbs role planning because the separation of the inmate from the wider world can continue indefinitely. Programming and identity trimming. Procedures such as bathing, searching, taking a life history, and instruction regarding rules function to code and shape the person into an object that can be fed into the administrative machinery of the establishment. Such programming inevitably involves exclusion of most of the person's prior bases of self-identification. Dispossession of property, name, and identity kit. After admission to a total institution, patients are stripped of certain possessions in which strong feelings of self are invested. They usually lose their full name, are stripped of personal possessions, and are denied access to the cosmetic and clothing supplies, or identity kit, required for managing personal image. In the absence of these resources, people lose their capacity to present their usual image to others. Imposition of degrading postures, stances, and deference patterns. The inmate is often required to adopt stances and postures, such as submitting to searches or standing at attention, which mortify the self. Furthermore, the necessity of asking for water, matches, cigarettes, or permission to use the telephone or bathroom, as well as staff expectations of verbal deference, force the inmate into verbal postures.
May I have my cigarettes, please, Miss Ratchet?
Forget the cigarettes, Cheswick. Cigarettes are not important. Sit down, will you? Christ's sake.
Whether the indignities are enacted by the person or imposed from without, they result in patients adopting a stance inconsistent with their previous notion of self. Contaminative exposure. First, the person's information preserve is violated, since data about the person's past behavior and social status are collected in a file accessible to the staff. Further, as the total institution offers no private space to conceal ordinarily private activities, the person is compelled to expose themselves completely. Broad-scale restrictions on self-determination, autonomy, and freedom of action. The essence of total institution is the removal of identity. Unlike similar experiences, the total institution does not seek to build a new identity in its place, but rather to annihilate all traces of self. Although Goffman wrote these descriptions in 1957, his definitions of the total institution remain relevant today. Just as Bly over 100 years ago gave her first-hand account of her experiences in the mental hospital, the following former patients now offer theirs.
I tried to kill myself. Well, the times when I was 16, now that I think back on it, were not because I tried to kill myself. It was because I was falling into the depression. That's when it really started to show up heavily. And my parents wanted to preemptively counteract that. So they sent me to this place called Aurora for 2 weeks, twice. God. And yeah, I couldn't leave.
My parents were beating the piss out of me, and I was just really tired of it, and was tired of growing up like that, so I tried to slit my wrist.
The reason I was mostly just feeling very just stressed out, and didn't feel like I had anybody to kind of talk to, and it seemed like my friends were just kind of drifting, so I felt super alone, I guess.
I was hospitalized. My parents were concerned that I was addicted to drugs. So after they released me for not being a drug addict, they sent me home with a scathing letter saying basically that I was a drug addict, but I was such a brilliant liar that they were not able to really hold me to that or convict me of it or something like that. So they had to release me.
At the time I was going to Southwest High School, I was a freshman, and I was popular, I did have some friends, but there were several girls that specifically did not like me that were also at my middle school. And what had happened was, I had cut myself a few times on the top of my arm, just for a scar. I wasn't self-damaging or trying to commit suicide or anything like that. One of these girls saw that and pretty much decided that they were going to get me into trouble. So they talked with the mental health liaison at Southwest High School. And the liaison came in and talked to me. I explained to her that I wasn't suicidal, I wasn't trying to harm myself, but she said that since these other people who weren't even friends of mine were claiming that I was, they had to take me in for an evaluation anyways.
My parents. You can be admitted voluntarily by your parents.
My parents did.
My family, my mom actually admitted me.
Well, I ran away from home after that when I was 16.
Not really. I was hoping for more of a kind of trust in them, I guess, but the whole thing kind of happened where, like, I set myself up to get found, and if I didn't say to my mom that I swallowed a bunch of pills, then she never would have known, and so not really.
No, it didn't change a whole lot after that. It was still the same when I got out.
We're still fighting over it. That was 20 years ago.
No, absolutely not.
Hell no.
No, I did not want to go.
Oh, all the time. My whole thing is just like, please let me go home now. I don't want to be anywhere near those places. I hate being in them. Ah, been in them so many times. I'm like over it. They don't help. They don't do anything. It's just like 72 hours to like cool off. Yeah, right. 72 hours isn't going to do anything to affect my mood. It's just going to make me more pissed off.
The entire time, I never wanted to be there. Everything that I said. Well, I mean, I never really asked to leave because I knew that I wasn't allowed to. I said that I wanted to leave and that I didn't want to be there, and they said, of course you don't want to be here, you're a drug addict. You want to be out there smoking crack. I never smoked crack.
Yeah, sometimes. I mean, like I said, there wasn't a whole lot of anybody to talk to about it. I mean, there was no one-on-one sessions or anything, so it was very hard. And like when I told the doctor how I was feeling, he only had like half an hour with me to talk, and so I didn't really get to express a whole lot of anything that was going on.
Well, I felt like pretty much I did express them multiple times that I didn't think I should be there. There are others here that agree with me on the staff and doctor's side that I shouldn't be here, that I shouldn't have even been admitted in the first place, period, and that the school really screwed up by doing this. And number one, I found out later, the school was supposed to contact both my parents before they took this action, and they never did that. They sort of, would brush it off, and it was the same cookie cutter response every time. Well, this is just policy. We have to cross our T's and dot our I's. We have to go by protocol, and pretty much nothing that I could say or do would change it.
Yeah, I think everybody that was there didn't want to be there, and I mean, I feel like every single person that was there had a handful of their own problems, but we weren't really allowed to talk to each other about it, so it was really difficult, even though some of us did.
And only a handful of them really thought that this was the place where they could get better.
Oh, well, everyone there was, I don't know that there was anyone there voluntarily. If they were, they weren't allowed to leave. But I'm pretty sure that everyone there was, like, their parents put them there. They did not put themselves there.
I definitely think so. And I understand erring on the side of caution. I understand taking certain things seriously and investigating people's mental health. But I also think that there are probably hundreds of other cases like mine where somebody involved with the school or somebody in somebody's family overreacted, and because of them overreacting and putting whoever ended up being the patient in that situation, they really did them a disservice because it was more traumatizing to me than anything else.
It's never 100% certain, but, I mean, for the most part, when you're 5150, it's 72-hour hold, unless the psychiatrist wants to be a dick.
The first doctor I saw talked to me for about 20 minutes, had me fill out a questionnaire, came back, and he really didn't even think there was anything wrong with me. He didn't even think I should be there. The second doctor really seemed like he wasn't sure, but he had to err on the side of caution for legal reasons, obviously, and that they couldn't contact my mother, and that my father refused to sign me out. And that was the whole quandary, that I could have left, for sure. They didn't think I was a threat to myself or anybody else. But yet they kept me there. I didn't find that out until right after they had gotten a hold of my mom, which I'd already been there for about coming close to 3 weeks at that point.
Anywhere between 9 days and 6 months.
No, they told me that if I didn't participate in groups and I stayed in bed like I did for the first few days, that I wouldn't be going anywhere until they saw drastic improvements.
You have the right to an interpreter. You have the right to confidentiality. You have the right to have clean clothes provided for you, to have food provided for you, to have everything. I said confidentiality. Um, there's open door policy. Should you have any issues, you have the right to change psychiatrists, stuff like that.
No.
Absolutely not. As a patient, you had no rights. Your parents had rights, the people who signed you in had rights, the staff had rights, but as a patient, you literally had rights at their discretion.
Yeah, they pretty much told me my rights were to do what they tell you, and stay in your room unless you were told otherwise. And if you followed those, you'd be able to leave out of here sooner. No.
No. I remember I did have to sign a disclaimer initially when they admitted me. It was one of those things where at this point I had no idea what was going to happen, and I didn't think I was going to be there for that long. So I just signed it. Like, it was pretty much agreeing to take a blood test, like confidentiality stuff, and filling out my personal information, and I didn't see anything on there and didn't get any information from them as far as anything like that. I do remember that I did sign stuff before, like I didn't take it out of the ordinary, but it being clear and readable or explained to me, no, definitely not.
No. Is there a way to file a grievance?
Oh yeah. I mean, like the first and second time. Okay, by the second time I had kind of figured it out. And then after that it was slowly trying to figure it out, but now I can get out in like, well, I mean, they legally have to keep you there for 72 hours, but I can get out on the third day. I know exactly what to say and how to do it. I just had to pick it up. Kind of just like make up stuff. They're like, oh, well, when you seem like you're better, which is really subjective. So,
Just get up every day and function, you know. Pretty much stop being depressed.
What was necessary to leave was completion of the program. Completion of the program entailed admitting that I had a problem, admitting that I was powerless, accepting that a higher power was the only way to overcome the problem. Oh, and then there would be probably like months of monitoring you to make sure that you had accepted God and a higher power as your miraculous savior.
I think the only thing was that I don't seem so suicidal, but I just wasn't there for that long. Like, I wasn't there for that long because our insurance didn't cover it, so I couldn't really get over anything there. But one of them was just, if I look happier, then I can, go.
Well, they said that I would be released when they felt that I was okay to be released, was kind of how they put it, when it's safe for you to be released. But after finding out, like, they did sort of mention to me that, well, you could petition for your own release, but unfortunately you're not over 16, so you can't petition for emancipation or guardianship of yourself to get out. And I thought that that was pretty crappy.
Well, you don't necessarily have to wake up at any specific time, but they'll like come and try to rouse you at 7. And then sorry. Breakfast is served at like 9. It's gross. And then you usually have to go to some stupid like group meeting where you like talk about your feelings or something. And then there's like an activity time. I usually take that time to color. There's lunch. Then there's probably another meeting. There's another free time. Sometime in there, each individual person sees a psychiatrist who ultimately decides when they go home. And then there's dinner, I guess. Then you just have to go to bed at like 9.
Pretty much we were admitted to our rooms most of the time, and then we could only come out of our rooms when we had like, we'd have like little group sessions where we'd go and like listen to music, and then like pretty much we weren't allowed to talk to anybody. Like we weren't supposed to like share any information or talk of, about our problems to other people that were admitted in there, but I mean, I do a whole lot.
Very easy, structured, of course. I didn't really think about it too much about being in the hospital, mostly just kind of meeting people kind of like me, my same age. And like the one thing that I remember is that like we couldn't touch anybody, not even like a high five or something, so we played card games, and like one of the card games was like slapping each other's hands, so it was very kind of, no touching.
You wake up, you'd go to a group meeting. It was just group meetings all day long. You'd have breakfast, go to a group meeting, go to another group meeting, have lunch, go to another group meeting. I know that there was a lot of prayer, a lot of name calling and accusations by the staff. Would just, the group sessions would basically be the staff berating the clients for being there and for having problems, and do you know what you did, and what you're doing, and do you know how you're hurting everyone, and then obscenities, strings of obscenities and names, and you're an asshole, you're a liar, you're killing your parents, and
I had to have the doors shut all the time. It was a plain bed nailed to the floor. The food, like they actually did get me some outside food from the cafeteria at HCMC. When I got to Abbott, there were some activities and stuff, and I did meet with the psychiatrist, but phone time was extremely limited. I was a smoker. They wouldn't let me have cigarettes or smoke the whole time I was there. They monitored phone calls. The food was abhorrent. I pretty much didn't eat the whole time. And it was just really horrible because they didn't really let us go outside or anything. It was probably about the end of the time I was there, they finally let me have a release for a day to get picked up by one of my friends and my friend's family. But other than that, like, it was really horrible. And I could definitely tell that there were other people there that were in much worse shape than I was, mentally and physically. And it was really not, it wasn't what I expected initially. As far as, they've monitored everything between myself and other patients. Like, there was no hugging allowed, there was no interpersonal relationships between myself and other patients. If you did do that, you were stuck in isolation. And I also remember, I like taking baths, I'm a bath person. And they had one shower on the whole unit, and you had to sign up to use it. And it was a tile room with a shower and a drain in the middle of the floor, nowhere to put any of your clothing, nowhere to even sit down. Like, there were bars and stuff you could hold on to, but unless you brought your own shampoo and conditioner in, tough luck, all you got was soap.
You don't get a cell phone. You have to eat shitty food. You can't wear a lot of certain clothes. You get a lot of stuff taken away from you because it's like you can hurt yourself with it. You have special utensils, and everybody basically walks around in a fucking nightgown, like a hospital gown. They're crazy people, and I got a roomie who would wake up screaming in the middle of the night.
You weren't allowed to even like, pretty much, I mean, you could look out a window, but you couldn't feel the sunshine. It was just like really enclosed and tight, and you weren't allowed to like leave your room. You weren't allowed to like use pencils or pretty much like do anything besides sit in a room until like a doctor came in or you had group sessions.
The touching thing, and I guess just the sort of making some connections with people my same age, but not really, because we couldn't like talk to each other about anything deep. So I guess just the freedom to talk about stuff.
Absolutely not. No, I had no freedoms. You know, every aspect of your day, every action you made was choreographed and regulated. And their attempt was, according to what they were saying, was to teach you to not even think for yourself. That you had screwed up, you had made bad decisions, and you had abused your free will. And the only solution was to surrender your free will to someone else that they would appoint, and then that person got to tell you what you thought and felt about everything. Well, I mean, there was the freedom to move, the freedom to make your own decisions. I was not allowed to draw or play guitar. I was not allowed to talk to, basically who you could socialize and how much time you could spend socializing was regulated. You weren't allowed to talk to girls, and you were only allowed to talk to certain other boys under, kind of supervised conditions. And, like I said, they wanted to take away your freedom to think, according to their own, manifesto. Like their goal was to take away all freedoms, and for you to, to attain a state of being an extension of someone else with no freedom. My sponsor in the program told me the only real freedom was having no freedom and then choosing to like it.
Awful. They have so much on their plates that they can't really give good attention to any one person. I mean, I would see the psychiatrist for like 5 minutes, and he would make a snap judgment based on how I was feeling at that one particular time, and not even taking into account that there are other small things that can create variances in attitude. So there's that. The food sucks. You kind of all get lumped together. Like, you have the people who try to kill themselves, you have the anorexics, you have the actual crazy people, you have, like, criminally insane people in there that have to, like, be put in special places. And, like, all of the doors, you have to press a button to get out, and you can't leave or do anything unless you have permission.
You could be by yourself every now and then. Like, I would want to write into my journal, but, they would check up on you about every 30 minutes or something. And the food was okay.
Well, the food was really good. The building was really nice. I mean, it was a rehab center for rich people's kids. So, physically it was really nice, but the social environment was horrific.
Yeah, the first time they had level 1, level 2, and level 3. Um, at like level 1, you got to stay up a little bit later. At level 2, you got to stay up a little bit later, and you got to have like a specific item for like an hour a day, and a couple other things. And then the third one, you got to stay up like until midnight, and you could go outside, and you could go down and eat in the cafeteria.
Yeah, but it took a long time to earn those. Like I said, I was there for over 2 weeks before they allowed me to get a pass for 6 hours to go and spend some time with my friends. And then after that, it's like when I came in, they patted me down. They had to get all this information about who I was with, their contact information. And it was really sort of a dehumanizing feeling, because I didn't feel the staff there were very compassionate at all towards my situation. Other than being in the detox unit for 2 days, not really. There were 2 periods of time, like I shared a room with another patient, and I didn't have somebody else staying in my room for probably about a week. And during that time, there were periods where the unit would go on lockdown, which meant you had to stay in your room. You couldn't open the door, you couldn't go out. Like during the night, you weren't supposed to leave your room for any reason. And that was super depressing.
No, but one of my the friends, sort of people that I made, did, and she had like a freak out. So all of us were a little afraid to go into 4B, I think it was. I think she was freaking out about the level of space that she wasn't allowed to get, so she just kind of freaked out.
Yeah, the first night when I got there, I was really upset and I was crying and stuff, and they told me if I didn't stop crying or freaking out that they were going to sedate me. And they ended up giving me a shot in my leg that put me to sleep for the whole rest of the day. So I was asleep for one whole day.
When I was 16, they put me on Zoloft, and I turned into a zombie, and I got all like emo about it and wanted to feel emotions. So I stopped taking it. And then when I was 21, I was super depressed, and so I decided to go back on Zoloft because it had worked before, and that worked for a little bit. And then I landed back in the hospital again, and while I was there, I told the psychiatrist that I just didn't want to feel anymore. I just wanted to be numb. And so he put me on lithium, which was awful. And then after that, because it gave me like restless muscles, it was really awful. But then they put me on Lamictal, and I'm still on Zoloft.
Yes, I went from 150 milligrams of medication to 500. To the point where like I felt like a zombie. I couldn't really function a whole lot, but I only got to see the doctor twice, so I mean, he didn't really know exactly what was going on, so I just kind of stayed at that level until I got out and then changed it myself.
Just that I was diagnosed as chemically dependent, and that was almost 20 years ago, and when I got a list of my diagnoses from my doctor like a couple of weeks ago, chemical dependency is still on there.
Well, they had prescribed me Zoloft, which I didn't like it. I wasn't happy about it. And after I was released and went to see a psychiatrist through my mother's insurance, I found out that the dosage they had me on was almost twice what anybody would prescribe for somebody of my age. And the psychiatrist I saw through my mom didn't even think that I needed it. As far as depression issues, they diagnosed me with mild depression, and yet they had me on over 200 milligrams of Zoloft, which is unheard of for anything like that.
The last psychiatrist I saw was the biggest dickhead ever. I've considered suing the hospital just because he was so abusive. He didn't give a fuck about me being sick. All he wanted to do was make me feel like shit and get back to his, his office in in Coronado, that overlooks the golf course. That's what he told me. I'm like, you gonna go play tennis too? Who do you think you are? He straight up threatened to keep me in for 30 days if I didn't start medication.
The staff sucked. They were really, really rude, and like they would do things like they would bring in their lunch and like eat Jimmy John's in front of you, and like you weren't allowed to like eat anything unless it was like hospital food, which no one likes. So I mean, they were just kind of just really impolite. Well, the whole month that I was there, I talked to the doctor twice that actually like was prescribing me a bunch of medication and stuff, and then there was like a counselor that we saw like once a day, but she didn't really talk individually with everybody. We just kind of like did whatever she told us to do, which was just like listen to music and like in your group, like tell someone how nice they look today. I mean, we didn't really have one-on-one like counseling or anything, so it didn't really help.
Antagonistic. There was, actually that's not true. It was, some of the staff were actually, very professional, but some of the staff, and particularly the guy who ran the place, were some of the most unprofessional people I've ever seen in my life. Very abrasive, emotionally unstable people who would erupt into screaming obscenities and threats if they encountered any kind of resistance at all. I hated him. I mean, there was a priest guy there who seemed to kind of try to understand what was going on. There were 2 or 3 people there who seemed to have not made up their mind yet that I was a criminal and a sociopath and a dangerous person. But most of the staff I did not get along with, and I just didn't like them.
There were some staff members that were much more understanding than others and friendlier, and unfortunately it seemed to be the night staff that were the more mellow, relaxed ones, and then the daytime staff. There were a couple that were nice, but then there were a couple that weren't so nice and were more forceful. But again, I figured out really early on not to rock the boat and just to keep quiet and don't really start anything with them, because that will only make things worse. That I should just relax and keep my head down.
We were supposed to focus on our own problems and not anybody else's, not try and help anybody, not try and make them think about why they were there. Just a couple of minutes, because the people, taking care of us were always there, and they were always watching. So every now and then I would want to, talk to people and why they were there. So whenever we saw them leave for a second, we would go into the corner and just talk. But it would be very hush-hush.
To socialize, in an unsupervised, maybe an hour.
The ones I did want to talk to, I'd say I probably got maybe 3 to 4 hours per day to talk to people and really socialize without a whole lot of other staff members and stuff keeping an eye on us. But that was few and far between. Sometimes it depended on the day, it depended on if an incident occurred with another patient, it depended on all sorts of different factors. But depending as far as unsupervised or looser supervision, it was really hit or miss. And most of the other patients there were pretty standoffish and wanted to keep to themselves, and the staff members did their job and nothing more, which made it even worse.
Oh, for sure. There was none. There's none. Upset. I mean, it didn't make anything better. Actually, it just exacerbated the situation. I kind of did. I mean, my dad never visited me. My mom would, and sometimes my family, which was weird because I would never see him, and my mom always would. I don't think I ever had friends come visit me.
Yeah, my parents came in a few times to see how I was doing, and my brother came in to visit me quite often, but it was really hard for me and them, so they didn't come too much.
I contacted my mom and dad, I think, once.
No. I was not allowed to contact friends. It was specifically designed to remove me from contact from friends. And then my family was instructed to go to an Al-Anon retreat in Hawaii where they sipped cocktails on a beach for 2 weeks. And then when they got back, they were upset with me for
I got to make a couple phone calls per day, but they limited your phone calls. Like, you could use the phone for 10 minutes each time, twice a day. Phone calls to family members were more frequent. You could receive calls from your family, but say if one of my friends called in and requested to talk to me, they would just take a message.
I think that they didn't really know what to think about it. It's not something they really understood. It's not something that I think they even understand now. But I know a lot of my friends just like took off, deserted me when I was in there. I think they pitied me, but I don't think they actually cared. They just wanted to keep up appearances.
My parents didn't really care. Like, they just came in to pretend like they felt like, to see how I was doing. I mean, my brother sat down and he would talk with me, and like, he was allowed to bring me stuff, like food and stuff, but I mean, it didn't really seem like they cared a whole lot.
well, they forced my hospitalization, and when I was sent home for not needing hospitalization, they were upset with me because the hospital instructed them that I was a pathological liar.
My father was really irate about it, and I am not sure why still. He just sort of flipped out about it and didn't really understand or want to understand, and pretty much washed his hands of the whole thing. My mother, when she found out, which it took them 2 weeks before they could even get a hold of her, and she was understanding of the situation but reluctant, because at the time her and I had bad blood between us, having to do with other family issues. So she was reluctant to sign me out until after she had some trial period, but my friends all knew that I shouldn't be there. And a few of them talked to the doctors and told them, you know, she really shouldn't be here. And my mom said the same thing to them, that she didn't know why I was there in the first place.
Ultimately, I don't think they did me any good. I don't think that they're worth how much debt I'm in right now. And I don't know. I think they're kind of pointless. And I think the idea is good on paper, but I mean, there's just not enough money. There's not enough, they can't pay as good of an attention to people. I mean, unless you have private insurance. I don't know. I just think the whole thing's stupid and it doesn't work.
No, I don't think that it benefited me at all in any way. It was more like I kind of felt like a prisoner. I was trapped, and if I didn't act or do what they told me to do, I wouldn't be able to leave, that I was going to be stuck there. So I had to pretend that I felt amazing and great.
No, it didn't seem, it just, they were trying to do their jobs and it wasn't really a caring place.
Did I benefit from it in any way? No. No, absolutely not. Well, my hospitalization was unnecessary, first of all. But they claimed that it was necessary, and they claimed that my resistance was pathological and sociopathic, and instructed my parents to never listen to a single word that I ever said for the rest of my life until I completed the rehab program, which, you know, until I completed AA, which I still haven't done. And they followed through to the letter of never listening to a single word that I said. Me and my parents before this had a fairly antagonistic relationship, but after this had an extraordinarily antagonistic relationship that really only escalated, and my parents have referred back to the hospitalization and their instructions from the hospital staff recently to explain why they are still antagonistic towards me.
No. If anything, it freaked me out so bad that any inkling that I've ever had of it being depressed or anything like self-harm totally left, because I knew what would happen, where I could end up.
Yeah.
And it straight up terrified me. After that, like, I was completely terrified, because there were obviously people there that were in way worse shape and had way more problems than I could even mention or imagine having, you know, and dealing with that at 15, it scared the crap out of me. I'm still afraid of hospitals. I had to be hospitalized because of sickness, a flu virus, when I was 18, overnight, and I had a super intense anxiety attack. And ever since then, like, I've had to go to the hospital a couple times for broken bones, but I'm always really nervous in hospitals now, visiting people in hospitals. I've had panic attacks, and it's one of those things where I never ever want to be in that position again in my life for any reason.
Absolutely, the ideas that I encountered in my hospitalization, ideas like surrendering to a higher power, surrendering to an authority figure, free will, and choosing unconditional obedience, I've encountered in numerous other. They seem to have become part of the general discourse in just the general public. For certain, my family went to an Al-Anon retreat where they were coached in how to be more antagonistic towards me, and but the antagonistic ideas are almost everywhere. Tough love and shit like that.
I was in an extremely physically abusive relationship probably about 2 years ago that escalated very rapidly. And they got extremely possessive of me, very controlling of what I did, and it really brought me back there because that was one of the threats that they had made to me, was that they were gonna tell my family and other people that I was suicidal and get me committed, because they knew that was one of my biggest fears, that this had happened to me as a child, and I was still really nervous about it, and it still is pretty close as far as memory-wise. I'll never forget it. And there have been a few times out of anger that my father and my mother have brought it up, that, well, you were in Abbott for X amount of days, and they wouldn't let you out, and I always bring up the fact, well, they wouldn't let me out because you wouldn't sign the papers. You know, I wasn't really supposed to be there, and there have been other people that I've told the story to that have used it against me in anger, or told other people about it, and they took it the wrong way, or misinterpreted what was really happening in the situation. So yes, I do feel that it has and can be used against me in the future.
Yeah, I went to jail for 72 hours, and I think I had more fun at jail than I did in the hospital.
Being in jail. Because you can't go anywhere or do anything, and the food sucks, and the people in authority are assholes, and you have to wear stupid clothing. It's basically just the same, except for one, you're in trouble.
Is basically
It
what
really
we're
did feel like
exploring.
a prison. It really did feel like the prison, and even though it was during the winter, like the end of the winter, early spring at the time I was there, like they would not let us go outside. There were no field trips. There was no nothing. Like you could not leave the unit, pretty much. And I got really pissed because there was a McDonald's right downstairs, and other staff would bring food up all the time for themselves, but you couldn't have any. And that I thought was a double standard, where it's like, even in jail, people can bring you food. You know, you can still get packages, you can still make phone calls, you can still have contact and know what's going on in the outside world. But I couldn't even read the news. I couldn't even watch TV. I had no idea what was going on outside. And that, I think, made me crazier than I was when I initially got there. Like, I was really in a state after I left, for sure.
Oh, well, there are definitely similarities. I mean, you're, physically, I mean, I don't want to say incarcerated because, I don't want to seem like I'm exaggerating the situation, but you're physically not allowed to leave. And while you're there, you have no rights. You can be forced to take medications you don't want to take. You're not allowed to talk to people unless they say so.
Honestly, like with my experience in the hospital, I feel like if you were in prison, you probably have more freedom than you would in a hospital. Because, I mean, in a hospital, you really can't do anything. You're not allowed to do anything. And at least in prison, you can go and walk around and, not feel completely enclosed and dead inside.
My whole spiel when it comes to this is that nobody can make the choice to get better or seek help but the person who is in need. And it's not going to happen unless they want to do it. And I don't know. I think we have dumb reasons, or dumb ways of going about things. I think if things were talked about and discussed directly, these things would not be an issue. If children had like safer households or a more stable life, or the communication thing, if they were at least talking to their parents about what's going on.
Just don't send your kid to inpatient, because, I mean, it honestly, for me, it felt like I had hated my parents more for putting me in a place like that instead of taking the time to figure out what was really going on and talking to me about it, being a responsible parent like they should have been. That's about it.
So I have a serious thing about needles and seeing my blood being drawn. They would come in every morning and draw blood from you, and they really were not very nice about it. I still have a scar on my hand from them drawing blood when I was still asleep, mind you. And I woke up to this and jerked my hand because I freaked out, and it actually cut my hand open and messed up my vein, and I still have sensitivity issues in my left hand on top of it. Like, the whole thing was just really not a good situation. I don't like confined places anymore. I like windows.
Because parents don't know what to do with their kids. Because parents these days don't relate to their children, which I guess is the way it's going to be forever. But, like, they don't know what to do, so they dump their kids off in one of these institutions in hopes of trying to fix them because they are bad parents.
Because I think they get to the point where, like, when your child is extremely depressed or, suicidal, they don't know what to do with them. I guess they don't have enough knowledge or resources for themselves to really know how to handle their child. I mean, I think that it would be helpful if there was more resources out there for, like, parents that are struggling with teens, instead of just throwing them in inpatient, because it doesn't help. It makes them worse, honestly.
I think parents have had problems controlling their children since the dawn of humanity, and especially in a modern society like this where there are so many temptations, and parents are afraid of their children making bad decisions, that they want control, and the system that I was involved in seemed to really offer parents control over their children.
Definitely misunderstanding, misinterpretation of signs or perceived warning signs, and simply they jumped the gun on it. They definitely did. They didn't ask me the right questions. They didn't take what I was saying into account. And I knew when the liaison officer at the high school talked to me, I knew that this was a serious situation. I tried to explain to her that in no way was I trying to harm myself, in no way had I contemplated suicide, and they really did not listen to me or take me seriously. They just decided, well, it's not my jurisdiction to make this decision at this point. We'll pass you along to somebody else that can.
Just please be careful, things can go wrong on the treatment side. Treatment is not harmless. It's not guaranteed to succeed. From my understanding, it almost never succeeds. I guess if you've exhausted all other options, then yeah, if it really is absolutely necessary to I did go to rehab one time later on when I was in my 20s, and I think I had the right to leave, but it was out in the country, so it would have been difficult to leave, and I kind of think that I needed to be physically removed from the situation in order to stop drinking at the time, which was what my problem was. But incarceration should not be a precautionary measure. It should be a measure of last resort, not the first step.
I would tell them to seriously think about it first, monitor this teenager's behavior for not just 1 or 2 isolated incidents, for a significant amount of time, and take them to see a therapist or some other mental health professional that's not a hospital, and get a full assessment, not just one appointment, multiple appointments, before making any kind of decision. Because really, I think it's sort of like medicating children and claiming they have ADD, or medicating teenagers with having some serious mental problem, when you really do not have all the cards in your hand. You don't know what's going on with this person, and in hindsight, I really was bad during that period of time, kind of out of hand, out of control, but I wasn't doing drugs, I wasn't drinking, I wasn't suicidal. And really, they did not go through the proper procedures before making that decision with me, and it was much more detrimental to my mental health that happened than it would have been to leave me alone.
I would suggest like finding a clinic that you can go to like for mental health, and actually going to like go see a counselor and have someone to actually talk to and help you, you know, get through things. And you know, they would probably prescribe you the right medication if you needed it. I mean, they would understand more than just being locked up in a hospital.